Sources for the history of modern India. An abundance of historical material is available for studying India from the mid-18th century to the mid-20th century. In constructing the history of modern India, priority needs to be given to archives. Archives refer to a collection of historical records and documents, usually primary source documents, i.e., those documents that have been created as a necessary part of some activity, administrative, legal, social or commercial. They are unique original documents, not consciously written or created to convey information to a future generation. An important part of archives relating to modern India are the official records, i.e., the papers of government agencies at various levels. The records of the East India Company provide a detailed account of trading conditions during the period 1600 to 1857. When the British Crown took over the administration, it also kept a large variety and volume of official records. These records help historians to trace every important development stage by stage and follow the processes of decision-making and the psychology of the policymakers. The records of the other European East India Companies, the Portuguese, Dutch, and French, are also useful for constructing the history of the 17th and 18th centuries. They are primarily important from the point of view of economic history, but much can be gathered from them about the political setup as well. There are also many contemporary and semi-contemporary works such as memoirs, biographies and travel accounts which give us interesting as well as useful glimpses into the history of the 18th and early 19th centuries. Newspapers and journals made their appearance in the later part of the 18th century, and they provide very valuable information on almost all aspects of the Indian society, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries. Other sources of modern Indian history include oral evidence, creative literature and paintings. Archival materials. There are 4 categories of official records: I. Central government archives, i.e., state government archives, e.e., records of intermediate and subordinate authorities, and, if, judicial records. Apart from these, there are private archives and archival sources available abroad. Central government archives. The National Archives of India, located in New Delhi, contains most of the archives of the Government of India. These provide authentic and reliable source materials on varied aspects of modern Indian history. The records with the National Archives come under various groups, representing different branches of the Secretariat at different stages of its development. This happened as the work of the East India Company was distributed among various branches: public or general, revenue, political, military, secret, commercial, judicial, education, etc., and a separate set of records was kept for each of these branches or departments. With the appointment of James Rennell as the first Surveyor General of Bengal in 1767, the Survey of India began to scientifically map the unknown regions of the country and its bordering lands. The records of the Survey of India as well as the journals and memoirs of the surveyors provide valuable information, not only on geographical matters but also on contemporary socio-economic conditions and other important historical aspects. The proceedings of the public, judicial and legislative departments provide ample data for studying the social and religious policies of the colonial government. The government's policies on education and the growth of the education system during the colonial rule are mentioned in the educational records of the Central Archives. The papers bearing on the emergence of the nationalist movement were part of the public series of the Home Department records, but, in 1907, a new series of records, Home Political, was started to deal exclusively with political and communal issues. The records of the Reforms Office are very useful for an analytical study of the constitutional developments from 1920 to 1937. Archives of the state governments. The source material in the state archives comprise the records of I. the former British Indian provinces, i.e., the erstwhile princely states which were incorporated in the Indian Union after 1947, and e.e., the foreign administrations other than those of the British. Apart from these, the records of those Indian powers which were taken over by the British, for instance, the archives of the Kingdom of Lahore, popularly known as Khalsa Darbar records from 1800 to 1849, are important source material. Another important collection of the pre-British public archives in India is the Peshwa Daftar housed in the Alienation Office, Pune. It forms the most valuable single source for the study of Maratha history for a period of almost a century before the fall of the Peshwas. For studying the history of the princely states of Rajasthan, viz. Jaipur, Bikaner, Jodhpur, Udaipur, etc., The archives of these states, now housed in the Rajasthan State Archives at Bikaner, are valuable. Similarly, the history of Dogra rule from 1846 in Jammu and Kashmir can be studied in the valuable collection of state papers housed at Jammu. The other significant archives of the princely states are those of Gwalior, Indore, Bhopal, and Rewa, all in Madhya Pradesh, Travancore, and Cochin in Kerala, Mysore in Karnataka and Kolhapur in Maharashtra. Archives of 3 presidencies. The early records of Fort William's, Bengal Presidency, were lost during the sack of Calcutta in 1756, but the archives of the Bengal Presidency after the British victory at Plassey have survived more or less in a complete series, which are partly available in the National Archives of India and partly in the State Archives of West Bengal. The records of the Madras Presidency begin from AD 1670 and include records of the governor and council of Fort St. George. In these records there is plenty of information bearing on the rise of the English East India Company as a political power in the south and in the Deccan, including the Anglo-French struggle and the English conflicts with other Indian powers. The archives of Bombay Presidency, housed in the Maharashtra Secretariat's Record Office, Mumbai, are extremely useful in studying the history of Western India, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Sindh and the Kannada-speaking districts of the erstwhile Bombay Presidency which were incorporated in Mysore in 1956. Archives of other European powers. The archives related to the Portuguese preserved in Goa, mainly belonging to the period from 1700 to 1900, are valuable for the history of Portuguese possessions in India. The orders and dispatches from Lisbon received in Goa and the responses and reports dispatched from India to Portugal constitute the most significant historical material among the Portuguese archives. The Dutch records of Cochin and Malabar are in the Madras Record Office and those of Chansura in the State Archives of West Bengal. The French archives of Chandurnagar and Pondicherry, now Puducherry, were taken to Paris by the French authorities before they relinquished these settlements. The archives of the Danish possessions were also transferred to Copenhagen when the Danes sold Tranquebar and Serampore to the English East India Company in 1845. The remaining Danish records, mainly relating to Tranquebar, 1777 to 1845, are now housed in the Madras Record Office. Judicial Records. Housed in the Madras Record Office, the archives of the Mayor's Court at Fort St. George, beginning from AD 1689, are the earliest available judicial archives. The pre-Plassey records of the Mayor's Court at Fort Williams have been lost, but those for the years 1757-73 are kept in the record room of the Calcutta High Court, along with the archives of the Supreme Court of Bengal, 1774 to 1861. Similarly, the records of the Mayor's Court at Bombay established in 1728 are available in the Maharashtra Secretariat's Record Office which also has the custody of the archives of the Bombay Recorders Court and the Supreme Court. Apart from containing the proceedings and minutes, this category of records contains copies of wills, probates, and letters of administration which are useful for genealogical studies and for investigations pertaining to the state of society and economic conditions in the respective regions. Published archives. The most significant archival publications are the parliamentary papers which include many excerpts from the records of the East India Company and the Government of India under the Crown. The reports of the parliamentary select committees, various royal commissions constituted on specific subjects like education, civil reforms and famines, and the parliamentary debates on the Indian Empire are indispensable. The proceedings of the Indian and provincial legislatures, the weekly gazettes published by the central and the provincial governments and collections of laws and regulations issued from time to time also serve as useful source material for historical research. Private archives. Private archives comprise papers and documents of individuals and families of note who played a significant role in the development of modern India. The papers of eminent leaders of the nationalist movement and the records of organizations like the Indian National Congress are housed in the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in New Delhi. The archives of banks, business houses and chambers of commerce are extremely helpful in the study of economic changes. Foreign repositories. A vast body of historical material related to the history of modern India is available in the repositories of erstwhile imperialist powers who ruled in different parts of the Indian subcontinent as well as in some other countries. In England, the India Office records, London and the records kept in the British Museum are very valuable. The India Office Records possesses various important documents, the minutes of the Courts of Directors and the General Court of the East India Company and various committees constituted from time to time. The minutes and correspondence of the Board of Control, or the Board of Commissioners for the Affairs of India, and the records of the Secretary of State and the India Council. The British Museum possesses collections of papers of British viceroys, secretaries of states and other high-ranked civil and military officials who were posted in India. The archives of the missionary societies, for instance, of the Church Missionary Society of London, provide insight into the educational and social development in pre-independent India. The Archives Nationales, Paris, and the archives of the French Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Colonies, and War have records that throw light on the history of French possessions as well as the socio-political conditions. The records of the Dutch East India Company is available in Rijksarchief, The Hague, and that of the Danish and Portuguese are kept in Copenhagen and Lisbon, respectively. Apart from the archives of the European nations, the archives preserved in Pakistan are of utmost importance. The West Pakistan Record Office, Lahore Record Office, Peshawar, records available in Sindh, etc., give information about the regional history of the Indian subcontinent besides shedding light on India's relations with Afghanistan, Iran and other neighboring countries in the colonial era.